close to 40 years, the John Birch Society has kept a watchful eye on the agendas and progression of the United Nations. The Society has one of the largest research facilities of its kind, which also houses countless articles and documents that analyze and detail UN activity. Using this information, along with commentaries from a host of authorities, some of which you are about to hear, the John Birch Society presents the United Nations, a look into the future.
I believe those individuals in this country, and there are plenty, who believe that we should have the right to own and bear arms, ought to be concerned with what's happening in the United Nations, because they are a threat to us. They would confiscate our guns. There have been proposals made at some of their conventions where they would literally repeal the Second Amendment. And I think that everybody should be alert to this and realize that this is not just fun and games, and this is just not a discussion club that we're dealing with.
I mean, the United Nations is an organization that, if anybody's interested in saving life, when they hear the name United Nations, they should run in the opposite direction.
This is the United Nations Treaty, and this is how the United Nations is beginning to limit our sovereignty, is through these types of treaties.
Individuals who believe in the right to own property ought to be concerned. Americans believe in that. They're careless about it. Sometimes they allow our governments to regulate too much and to tax us too much. But really, the right of private property ownership is severely threatened by our own government. But it's going to be a lot worse if the United Nations gets involved. There is no way that you can have the concept of private property right. They believe in welfare redistribution, socialist redistribution, that everybody owns everything, and they would take from the wealthy and give to the poor to get an equal balance. Same old story that we've heard for years, but they do not protect the right to own private property by anything promoted by the United Nations.
The election process will become the task of world government monitors. The U.S. Congress, President, judicial system, and state and local government shall exist only as a facade to assure American citizens that they still have a voice in government. Checks and balances among branches of government will be eliminated. The states will become mere subdivisions of the national government, just as the national government will become a subdivision of the world government. The Bill of Rights portion of the U.S. Constitution will be superseded by the UN Convention on Civil and Political Rights. The U.S. Constitution will be supplanted by the UN Charter and consigned to the ash heap of history, a useless relic of the past. All other UN conventions will take effect. Appointed officials for state and local regions will be forced to comply with these international rules when representing their sectors. Following the pattern already established in China, only approved churches adhering strictly to government dictates regarding religion will be tolerated. All churches desiring to remain independent of government compliance will be disbanded, their houses of worship converted to other uses, or simply burned to the ground, and their pastors incarcerated. Churches submitting to government regulation will be forced to modify their beliefs to conform with the anti-Christian attitude of the almighty state. No exceptions will be allowed.
Brought into each country, into each religion, and there will be no choice because the whole thing is control. The entire basis of the one world religion is humanism. And humanism, when you take it back to its roots, is strictly atheism, paganism, and eventually, if you trace it back even further, you are actually right into the occult.
If United Nations has their way, there will be curtailment of our right to practice religion. They are not going to be believers in the right to practice our religions as we have seen fit throughout this country, and therefore those individuals who are interested in this subject certainly cannot be complacent about what the United Nations is doing.
It is certain that these new UN rules governing the American people won't come without resistance, but by then resistance will be futile. Citizens who attempt to defend whatever freedoms they have remaining will join the victims of the inevitable brutality and bloodbath carried out by a tyrannical UN dictatorship. For those still wondering if the United Nations would actually resort to such atrocities, consider for a moment the UN's lesser-known side. The United Nations organization was originally created by a small but powerful group of subversives as a future seat of a one-world government, camouflaged as the world's last hope for peace. And concealed by a barrage of self-generated propaganda, the UN has been responsible for some of the most controversial and violent acts of aggression in history. Since its founding in 1945, the UN has made gradual and significant progress toward the ultimate goal of its founders, world domination. Today, enormous in size and influence, the UN has a countless number of programs, agendas, and conventions ready to supersede the laws and practices of all nations, most certainly including the United States. To see the wisdom of what the John Birch Society has been saying for well over 3.5 decades. Get us out of the UN. March 20th, 1997.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get the trick law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real...
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. It is December 30th, 2015, New Year's Eve. The last half of, day and a half of 2015. So thank you for joining us tonight. I was thinking of something totally different that I was just going to say, and then I totally forgot about it. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. We're on weeknights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker.com and NonPartisanLibertyForall.com live. You can also listen to the archives, all of them at Spreaker.com, all the ones we ever did, but you can now listen to the archives on YouTube. You can listen live through Facebook as well, and SoundCloud, as well as Tumblr and Twitter post the archives as well. So lots of different ways to listen to the show. So hopefully people will find us out there that way as well. I was just talking with Shire Dude, so we'll give him a plug if this works. ShireDude.com. So there's a plug for Shire Dude, who will be joining us next week, as will Ken Shorjan. I hope everybody has all their New Year's plans together and has a great New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We will not be on tomorrow, which is New Year's Eve, but we will be back next Tuesday, unless I try to make the show up on Monday, but probably not. So tonight we have an interesting show for you. It relates a little to yesterday's show, but just in a couple areas, but not a lot. We'll be talking about the checks and balances of power on each branch of government. You know, when you're in high school and you take a government class and they tell you, oh, yes, well, see, we're different than other governments because we have checks and balances. And then this group over here watches this group over here, and they cannot do stuff on their own. They also have to go through this group, but I guess they never heard of coercion or those words. I was trying to think of something funnier to say. But as we know, it is all government. It's like a corporation. It's all government. And just because it's in a different fucking branch doesn't really seem to make a difference, especially in the judicial branch. So I know they show you they're fighting all the time and all of that stuff, but really it's it's professional wrestling is really what it is. Even I was talking more with like the branches, like the president fighting with Congress. But then you have the parties fighting with each other and all of that, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. And then they're golfing on the weekend. So they have mastered the art of fighting with each other. That's probably why there's been politicians that have been actors, but some of them have sucked. But, I mean, that's what it is. Look at Reagan. I mean, Reagan was actually an actor. It's not like he was a politician who became an actor. He was an actor. And there was the other guy who died recently, Fred Thompson, who ran for president, I believe, in 2008. And he was an actor as well. I don't know if he was a politician first and became an actor or vice versa, but politicking, I guess that's my new word there. Politicking and acting is, I mean, that's what you're doing essentially. So although Obama he's too stiff to be, he's good at reading teleprompters, but that's about it. I think as an actor, he'd be a good television actor because he needs a teleprompter. Like, he wouldn't be a good movie actor unless they stopped the camera each time and told him the line. But I don't know that he could memorize one line. That's right. I read off the teleprompter. It's teleprompting. If I was born in the 1800s before teleprompters, I would have been fucked. But since I was born in a day of the technology we have now, I'm great. I don't know why they don't just have a backup like thing in his ear, because people have said, and I've never seen this because I don't watch a lot of Obama speeches, or if I do, it will be like a short clip or something. But why he doesn't have a backup earpiece and just have somebody fucking read the speech to him, I don't know. So maybe he does, and we're just not aware of it. So before I get to that, I'd like to tell everybody about the show, because I almost missed that part. We promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do what you want, as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. I heard another show today, we won't say which one it is, and I'm going to try to think of how to explain it without really knowing who it is, because obviously I don't want to give them any promotion. Not like that many people listen to my show anyway, or they need promotion from me. But that I really can't stand them. Seriously, I'm sorry. I can't. It's listening to them is like a train wreck. So it's like, sometimes you want to see the train wreck. But one of the things, like, if they stopped at a certain point, I might agree with them on some things, because they have like a point that's true, but then they take it to this whole nother level where it's just, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, where it gets nuts. And in listening to that, like, I'll say whatever I want to say. I won't sugarcoat stuff. I won't talk about people for the most part, or if I do, I'll do it like this way because I'm not trying to start trouble. It's not a positive for the show, and my show's more about not being positive in a sense of being upbeat, but being positive in as far as promoting my ideas. Now, that might be in a negative way because I might be complaining about government or the police or some other agency. So it's not about being, fucking Mr. Rogers, like that kind of positive. But it's about promoting the ideas instead of arguing with people about the ideas. So, like when I have co-hosts on, I have people on that I pretty much agree with because the point is not having somebody on that I'm going to argue with. I mean, I don't have to agree with them on every little single thing, but the point is to have people on that have the same mind state or same ideology when it comes to this stuff. And they may have other ideas that I miss and things like that, but we're promoting these ideas and getting them out there. But this person, not only do I think they're definitely a conservative fascist, but they have some points that if they stopped at a certain point within that point, if that makes sense, I'm not one of those people. Like, you have these politically correct people and a lot of people that are, I think, that lean to, I hate to use fucking words like this, but like to the left. And I'm talking about people that believe in freedom or say they believe in true freedom, which I don't think you can and really lean that far to the left. I guess it depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about just doing, socially and doing things yourself, like this person had brought up polyamory before, which that has nothing to do with leaning to the left or anything, or you being less about freedom. It in some ways you can say it's you being more about freedom, but they had criticized it as, being part of this social justice and all of that shit and lumped in polyamory. I'm like, well, that doesn't really fit. That's just something that they want to do. I don't know what that has to do with the political correctness or whatever and that whole thing. But anyway, but on some of these ideas, like when it comes to racism and stuff like that, I'm going to say it how it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. On one side, there is racism. Anybody that sits there and says, no, there's no racism at all, you're full of shit. And that's what they do, of course. But on the other side of it, it doesn't mean that everything's racist, that anything that happens and the one person is white and the other person is black, it's racist, or that there's not racism from black people or from any other race. Any race can be racist or discriminatory or whatever words you want to use. So to think that that's not going on neither, I mean, that's a bunch of bullshit too. It's pretty much somewhere in the middle, and that's where a lot of things end up, because you got one side that's saying, no, this is totally over here. No, there's no racism at all. And then on the other side, there's, everything's racist. And really, it's in the middle. Yes, there is racism, but it's not as much as you say over here, and it's not nothing like you say over here. But you have people that it sounds like they purposely try to be politically correct. Not this person I'm talking about. They just say whatever. But other shows that try to be too politically correct and not be honest about the way they think things are. And that's where I believe that I am, and if people want to label me or talk shit or say whatever, I mean, I've talked about the way that I've grown up, and I've seen racism personally from both black and white people, where I was discriminated against or made fun of or whatever from both sides. So, I mean, I can say for a fact, it just based on my own experiences. Now, and that was because I had talked about, when I was younger, I had braids in my hair, and I sat, hung out like junior and senior year with all the black kids and whatever, and got a lot of shit there was definitely more from the white people, no doubt. But there was some from the black people that backlash there, that they didn't like me because of that as well. Now, nowadays it's totally different from what I understand, but back then, at least where I was at, it wasn't. But I don't know, like I guess I was just thinking about, because earlier listening to this person, that they're just nuts, and a lot of times annoying, and really just, I don't know. So anyway, but my point being that some of they have some legitimate, in all that craziness, they still have some legitimate points. It's just like, you start talking about the legitimate points, and then you totally derail. That's why it's a train wreck, because the train totally fucking derails after like a couple sentences, and then it's like, well, what the fuck are you talking about? Or it just gets a little crazy, but whatever. That's one thing where I have come out and said that, and somebody got angry over this, who I'm no longer, who I no longer associate with, but that I said that I don't look at issues in terms of color. It's in terms of if people are being harassed by the government. And if you had heard the speeches I played by Malcolm X yesterday, I mean, that's what he was bringing up. He was bringing up the government. Like, this is because of government, and this is because of government. And so, and that's how I look at it too. But I look at it as, if people are being abused by the government and things are happening that shouldn't be, whether they're all black or a mixture of black and white, or whatever the races on the people might be, it doesn't matter, because I'm focusing on the act that's happening and speaking out about that not happening. I don't have to speak out about it. Well, it's happening to black people, or it's happening to this race, or it's happening to that race. No, it shouldn't happen anymore. And just like the police, I don't believe they should exist anymore, and that will get rid of a lot of issues. Yes, of course it's easier to say than for it to actually happen, but that's how I look at it. What would be the point of me just focusing on one race instead of focusing on specific issues? Whether it happens, even if it's something that just happens to one race, then I would still just focus on that issue. Because a lot of times people with the whole the Black Lives Matter thing, all I'm hearing is Black Lives Matter. I never hear anything about cops, because that's the issue to me, is cops. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that real briefly. And speaking of derailing, that's kind of where I'm going right now. So anyway, I have a couple stories to talk about before we get to our main topic. I've talked about this a bunch of times, and here's another example of this happening. So I haven't had any articles, I think, in a while. I know there was one in Seattle like a year ago. Not like I've been looking for them. But I have said before on the show that the FBI finds, and I kind of said it half joking, but I was serious, that they find retarded people and they take them and encourage them to carry things out and give them all the weapons and then have them blow something up, but they press on the button and it doesn't blow up. And here's an article from the Free Thought Project where that exactly happens, where they take a kid with a 51 IQ who's mentally retarded and also has a couple other mentally debilitating issues. So they had contacted him. I guess he was able to talk in online chats. So an FBI agent trolling the web started talking to him from Homeland Security. Fuckers. And then I guess he's even unable to use the bathroom without assistance. That they were pretending to be part of a plot and that they would help him to carry out a plot. Now, he probably doesn't even know what the fuck terrorism even is or what Al-Qaeda is or ISIS or any of that. So right now, he was charged with assisting the effort to... Wait. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. He was charged with... What was he exactly charged with? I don't see that. I know he's being held on $1 million bail. Something with terrorism, some kind of... He didn't do anything, but assisting in terrorism, material assistance to terrorism. So that's why they said that he needs assistance to use the bathroom, but he's providing material assistance to terrorism on the basis of an online conversation. So, and these were FBI agents posing as recruiters for ISIS and the Taliban. So right now he remains in jail. That's just, and there you go. Then they add it to the fucking list of look at all the terrorist plots we stopped. And this is what they do. And this is how they justify what they do. And it was funny because somebody was talking today about terrorist attacks, and they're like, yeah, what happened in San Bernardino and France, and because there's really not shit that happened in the U.S. I mean, I don't know how you can keep mentioning France anyway, because that's not the United States. That's a different country, and it's far. I don't know exactly how far it is, but it's far. They're like an 8-hour. I know England's an 8-hour difference from Las Vegas. So it's got to be over 3,000 miles away from here. So the fact that they can keep using France as some fucking, oh, look, a terrorist attack. I think they did the same with, I believe it was Norway, because I read this book that was total propaganda called Lone Wolf Terrorism. And it was just basically saying that anybody can be a terrorist and you got to be worried about these people. It was a come snitch on people type of book because anybody can be a terrorist. That's what they're trying to push now, is essentially anyone can be a terrorist. The person next door, no matter what they look like, what they do, how friendly they are or not or whatever, all of these things, these people can be terrorists. But especially if you're quiet and keep to yourself, then there's real danger of you being a terrorist. So we're getting to the state, and I had talked about this yesterday, comparing the U.S. to East Germany with all the spying, and how in East Germany they had a bunch of, 1 for every 6 people were part of the secret police. And we have so many different, I shouldn't even say we, the U.S. government has so many different agencies out there that are essentially secret police agencies as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they have NSA, they have FBI, ATF. I don't know why the fucking ATF even exists and wants to get involved in all this shit. They have the CIA, the State Department, who knows what goes on there. So it's crazy. I took a list of things and basically compared them, and the United States is no different than East Germany. They even want to build a fucking wall. Now, they're saying to keep Mexicans and terrorists out. I don't know how there's a comparison there. Yeah, we want to keep out the terrorists and we want to keep out the Mexicans. It's just kind of fucked up that to put them in the same sentence. But the Canadians, they're okay, I guess. We want to let them be able to sneak in for whatever reason. So, and maybe they'll want to build a wall over there. Maybe they'll even build a fucking wall, like an underwater wall along the coast. I guess it wouldn't be a wall because they need to open and close it. So some kind of port where they may even have these, I don't know, where you can open and close it and lock it down for the evening so nobody can get in. But of course what they're doing is they're locking everybody. If you build a wall, you're making it harder for people to leave the fucking country. And they want to take away your passport now for all these fucked up things, like if you owe a certain amount of taxes and things like that. So, and because the U.S. controls most of the world, that they are an empire, they can mandate that, and a lot of countries just listen to them and go along with them. Not every country, but they can get other countries to go along with them, where you can't get into another country without your U.S. passport or something. I'm sure there's countries you can get into without it, but probably not many. And they're probably not countries you would want to go to. So I just wanted to bring this up because it's another example of the FBI doing their bullshit just to improve statistics, really, or get somebody a fucking bonus or something. So that it's just pretty ridiculous. And with that, there's another story which is kind of related to terrorism as well, that the Democrats, I guess, are calling for a surtax for people to pay for the war against the Islamic State, that their air campaign has cost $5 billion. I guess their air campaign in trying to help ISIS and dropping off supplies, because it seems like that's all they've been doing. First of all, this is just so fucked up. It's like, if you want to go and bomb ISIS, okay, go ahead, but I'm not going to give you my money for it. But no, they're just going to take it. But it's ridiculous that they'll just take your money and say, oh, you have to pay for whatever we're doing with ISIS. You have to pay for first the funding of ISIS, because the U.S. government is supporting them and giving them food and weapons and all of these things. So you have to pay for that. Then you have to pay for the pretend bombing that they're doing. And really, they should stay out of it anyway. I mean, in all seriousness, if it wasn't for the fact that they created them in the first place, and maybe now they're getting out of control, I don't know, but Russia is pretty much taking care of it, so who gives a fuck? But this whole bullshit that ISIS is going to come over here and do all this stuff, and again, ISIS will only come over here if the U.S. government wants them to come over here. And, oh, but look what happened in San Bernardino. Yeah, that one thing where a guy shot some people at work who was born in the United States. Yeah. The sympathizer who came up with his own idea. Hey, I'm going to kill some people at work. Well, how is that any different from fucking crazy postal workers? I don't know where he worked. I know he worked for the government. So maybe working for the government. I heard this one person I knew, they actually got a government job. They're like, I get, it's almost impossible for me to get fired. I get a pension. I have to leave at this time and all these benefits, but they're like, it's boring. I have nothing to do all day. And they actually left and came back to my company. Not my company now. This was years ago. So maybe they go nuts because they are so bored at their government job that they go nuts and shoot people. I mean, what's to say, though, seriously, like, this guy just isn't fucking crazy. I brought this up before when I was bringing up, there was a documentary I had seen, Jesus, maybe when I was like a teenager or a little while after, where they were going through teenage murders, like murderers, and why. And one was obsessed, this 13-year-old was obsessed with Friday the 13th, and he killed his friend's mother for him wearing Friday the 13th hockey mask and everything. And he said that he was influenced by the movie and whatever. And again, that's for every million people, maybe, well, not even, for every 300 million people, maybe 2 people are influenced like that by a movie. I mean, it's just, it rarely happens, but some people are nuts. So what about the guy just being nuts? I don't, just because he believed in ISIS, but maybe even his belief in ISIS was him being nuts. Because a lot of this shit makes no sense, to be honest. If you look at ISIS and everything that's been reported about ISIS, even in the independent media, it's still that they're raping people and chopping people's heads off, and they're not good people. It's not like they're doing something that would be appealing to anybody than someone who's nuts. So, or somebody who wants money. I had mentioned before, there was a guy in Afghanistan, and they asked him why he joined ISIS. And he's like, well, they pay me a lot more than this other place that pays me like nothing. And I think they were only paying him like $700 a month. So I guess compared to what they pay at other jobs, it was a lot of money. And of course, who's supplying ISIS with money? I know they said, well, Turkey's giving them oil to sell, and that's how they're getting money. And yeah, and the U.S. government is giving them fucking money too. So it's just ridiculous. But anyway, now they want us to pay for it also, because they're gonna bomb and miss on purpose, and we have to pay for that. And we also have to pay to make sure ISIS can pay their fighters, all their fighters for hire. And who knows how many, they never really talked about this, or they may have, and I just didn't see it. But as far as what percentage of ISIS fighters are being paid, I thought they just, were into it because jihad, that's what they tell you. Oh, they just want to kill you. Now, think about this for a minute. Like, they say that they just hate Americans and want to kill them. Okay. So, to be able to do that, it's not that easy, especially when you're in a country like 10,000 miles away or however far, just like maybe if they're actually there in front of you or something and you can somehow get a hold of them, but really it's just about that they just hate Americans. And I can understand people that have had their family members killed and want some sort of revenge or something, but a lot of the shit just doesn't make it just doesn't make sense. And somehow the government has been able to push these lies on people and they just absorb them like sponges. It's crazy. So I am going to take a break. When we come back, we will talk all about the checks and balances of government and how there really isn't checks and balances. Checks and balances is just an illusion. And I did talk yesterday about one way where you could have checks and balances and it would be a real check and balance. So I'm going to play this quick clip and we'll be back after this. NonPartisanLIbertyForall.com.
Here's one for you. What are checks and balances?
Is that what I have left over in my checkbook at the end of the month?
It's how the power is controlled, like in the state of California.
That's right, and if you don't know how it works, you will.
The California Channel presents Checks and Balances, a look at how your state government works with your host, Kelly Jean.
Here's an easy one. Can you name one of the 3 branches of government?
Senate. The Assembly.
The legislative branch?
That's it. The legislative branch is one of the 3 branches of government. In California, the legislative branch is
the tree branch
broken down into 2 equal but separate chambers called houses. One house is the Senate and the other is the Assembly, and together they're called the legislature. The legislature takes the people's ideas and writes them down into laws. Ideas like
the purpose of government should be to protect the people's natural rights of life, liberty, and property.
Really, they do that. They actually write down what the people want and put them into laws. Is that what she said? So let me rewind this for a second, because that was total bullshit.
And writes them down into laws. Ideas like
yeah, she said that they take down your ideas and write them into laws. No, they take down their ideas and write them into laws. They have their secretary take down their ideas. And later I'll get to the definition of government, which doesn't say anything about protecting you or doing what's best for the people, or it's there for any of those type of things.
Purpose of government should be to protect the people's natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and that no king or king should have absolute power.
Or
separating powers of government among different branches will ensure that no one branch will have all the power, and each branch should represent the interest of a different group of the people.
Working within the California State Constitution, the legislature has the power to create rules and laws we must live by for the common good of all the people in our state. Rules like
for the common good of all the people in your state. Well, one, I'm glad I don't live in California. So for the common good. So what you going to say? Like what? Because there's all these laws out there, ridiculous fucking laws that I guess you have to obey them because they're for the common good, because you don't have any individuality or ability to decide for yourself what you want to do. It's the government decides what's in the common good.
Which side of the road we drive on, how old you need to be in order to vote, or how long we must go to school and what we should learn. Okay, let's name another.
How long we must go to school and what we should learn. That's all for the common good of the government to figure out. That's good to know. Well, of course, again, that's California. So
other branch.
That's easy. City Council.
The governor, I know that.
Getting warmer.
The executive branch.
Yep, the second branch is the executive branch. And this branch of government contains all the elected officials of the state, including the governor, attorney general, treasurer, and secretary of state. This branch upholds the laws passed by the legislature and manages the affairs of California. The governor of California is the head of this branch of government. And can you name the third branch of government?
The Supreme Court?
The judges. Is it the courts?
The judicial?
That's right, the third branch is the judicial branch. It is a body of public officials, usually called judges or magistrates, who interpret the laws of the state. This branch includes the civil, criminal, and appeals courts. The final authority on all appeals and interpretation of the laws in California is the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court decides if the laws of the state are in agreement with the state's constitution. It has the power to settle disagreements about what those laws mean.
They do not decide whether they're in agreement unless something happens where you actually have standing and take it to the fucking court. They don't go through the laws and say, hey, these are not in agreement. So that's not how it works.
The Supreme Court can declare laws unconstitutional. Now that we know what the three branches of government are, how do they work? The trick is to make sure the government doesn't have too much power, because when you have too much power, things get a little dicey. Too little power, and you lose control, and things get all out of control. First, let's take a look at the legislative branch. Each member of the legislature is elected by the people, and by law, they are limited to the number of terms they may serve. The legislature has the power to create the laws that we in California must obey. But the legislature must obey the state constitution, and it says, in order for a new law to be created, 3 things must happen. First, a member of the legislature must write the idea down. This written idea is called a bill. Second, the member needs to get a majority of the members of both houses of the legislature to vote in favor of the bill. And third, the governor must approve the bill after it has been passed by the legislature. Once these 3 events happen, a new law goes into effect. So how are the powers of the legislature limited? Well, one way is for the governor not to approve a bill passed by the legislature. Here's an example. What if a bill was passed by the legislature that said all students under the age of 18 must attend school 365 days a year, but the governor felt it was wrong to do that? The governor could then veto the bill and the bill doesn't become law. Can a bill become a law even if the governor vetoes it? It can, but it's not easy. The legislature can vote again on the bill, and if it passes by a 2/3 majority of the full legislature, a bill can become a law. While it's rare that a governor's veto is overturned, it does happen. A recent example of a bill that was passed after the governor vetoed it was in the 1970s. The legislature believed that when certain laws were broken by someone and they were found guilty, the punishment for breaking that law was death. The governor did not approve of capital punishment, so he vetoed the bill. But the people of the state, with their representatives in the legislature, believed so strongly that capital punishment was needed to deter crime that 2/3 of the legislature voted to override the governor's veto. When they did, capital punishment became a part of the laws we all must live by. Another way to limit the power of the legislature is found inside the state's constitution. It says that the legislature could not pass laws that unfairly limit your basic rights. What does that mean? Well, let's suppose a law was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor that said you cannot drive a car unless you belong to a certain religion. How do you protect your rights in cases like this? Well, listen up, this is cool. Remember the judicial branch and the state Supreme Court? Well, they have the power to declare the laws made by the legislature to be unconstitutional. You would ask the court to look at this law to see if it violated the rights you were given under the Constitution. The court would then look at the law, and if they agreed with you that the law did violate your basic rights, it would say that the Constitution does not give the legislature the right to pass that
If
law
you have
because
standing,
the law is unconstitutional.
which we'll talk about
when
later.
the state Supreme Court finds a law to be unconstitutional, the law must be removed and not enforced. Now, let's take a look at the executive branch. Remember, the executive branch is made up of many elected officials. The governor is the head of the government, and the governor has the power to control the legislature by vetoing bills. The governor has the power to appoint people to important state government positions, but the legislature must approve of everyone the governor appoints. If they don't approve, the governor has to appoint someone else. The governor has the power to make deals with other states and nations, but the legislature must approve of each agreement before it can become final. The governor has the responsibility to prepare the state budget, but the legislature can make changes in that budget. And both the governor and the legislature must agree on the budget before it becomes official. The Attorney General has the power to enforce the laws passed by the legislature and the governor, but they can't go around arresting people just because they have the power to do it. So, to prevent the abuse
Sure
of this
they
power,
can.
there's a few things you need to check. 1, that a law was broken. 2, that the person arrested did it. And if it's not proven in a court of law, they must be set free. Which brings us to the third branch of government, the judicial branch. This branch is made up of all the courts in the state, and their main function is to settle disagreements between individuals and the government. And these disagreements come from just about everywhere. From the traffic courts. Oh, this reminds me of that ticket I forgot to pay. Oh well. Where was I? From the traffic courts all the way to the highest courts in the state Supreme Court. And it's the state Supreme Court that can say a law is unconstitutional. And how do we balance the power of the judicial system? Well, that can be done in a couple of ways. First, the judicial system is made up of people who must have a minimum experience in the legal field. Second, they are appointed by the governor for a 12-year period. And third, they need to be confirmed, not only by the legislature, but by the people too. And we do that through the election process.
It is the people who decide if the governor has appointed the right people to interpret the state constitution to see that the laws are made by the legislature and the governor, enforced by the Attorney General, and that
Governor.
these laws protect the people's natural rights.
See, that's all there is to it. I told you it was
Hello
simple.
there, Governor.
A letter from one of our viewers. They write, Kelly, I watch
You
your show
suck.
every day, but I'm confused. What if the people want to pass a law and the legislature and the governor don't get around to passing it? What happens then? Signed, John Public. You know, somehow I just knew this question would
Nothing.
come
It
up.
fucking
so
sits
earlier
there.
today, I spoke with the 23rd governor of this state, Hiram Johnson, to ask him what he knew about this issue.
Kelly, for the first 60 years that California was a state, we had the same type of checks and balances in the state's constitution that were put into the United States Constitution. But around 1911, it was clear that some corporations had too much power and influence over the governor, the legislature, and the courts. So we decided power to the people.
And just how is that going to work?
Well, in 1911, we made it possible for the people themselves to enact laws through the initiative process. And they can veto laws through the referendum process, and they can throw elected officials out of office through the recall process. The people can use each of these powers simply by
That's how I
collecting
became
signatures
governor
on
of
petitions.
California.
Okay, I can understand how we, the people, can balance the abuse of power with the referendum and the recall. But where's the checks and balances on the people? I mean, what if the people want to pass a really stupid law? Can the governor veto it or the legislature repeal it?
Very good, young lady. It's actually the courts who have the power and the duty to throw out any initiative, no matter how popular, if the initiative is unconstitutional, just like they can with any law.
So what you're saying is no matter how many people vote for an initiative, it can't become law if it conflicts with the Constitution or our basic rights as citizens of California?
No, the interpretation of
Yep,
the Constitution.
that is correct.
There's a big difference
Back
there.
to you, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, Governor Johnson. See, I told you it was that easy. So I ask you, how many branches of government are there?
3.
Right, and how do we keep it all running smooth?
We create a state government with a separation of power between the 3 branches of government, a system of checks and balance so that no one branch of the government will have all the power, and that the power is firmly in the hand of the people of the state of California. I feel very proud that the people of this fine state and nation took the idea that I brought forth onto
Yeah,
the scene,
right. We'll
and
see you
that they
next
took this
time.
idea and made them their own.
Sorry, I hate when people fake laugh there. And I just did it.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username NonPartisanLibertyForall.
That's right. You can call in at 702-470-7664, or you can Skype in, username NonPartisanLibertyForall. and get on the air. I don't remember the last time somebody called or Skyped in, but that means you could get on the air rather quickly. So if you do want to Skype in, just send a contact request to Nonpartisan Liberty for All, your name, where you're calling from, what you want to talk about. And if you want to call in, if you could just send a text first, I would appreciate it, with same thing, your name, where you're calling from, and what you want to talk about. So that it was true, and that went through the state level, where the state is pretty much the same as the federal, except they have different numbers, meaning like the amount of representatives and the Senate and things like that. And in Nevada, as they do in California, they have the Assembly and the Senate, as opposed to the Senate and House of Representatives. But we're going to go through the federal checks and balances and powers of all these branches of government, and essentially all the flaws with this whole setup. Because you have to keep in mind, well, you don't have to. Again, I hate telling people what to do, but you have to, whatever, you being anybody, have to remember that this is one organization. It's a corporation, essentially. That's what the federal government is, a corporation. Or actually, it's like a bunch of mini corporations that are all subsidiaries of the federal government, essentially. It might as well be. And I think a lot of them are set up legally as legal corporations. So I don't know if every thing is, like, every agency is set up as a legal entity or not, and how that is all set up. But I do know that there are at least some that are set up as legal entities. I think all of them, when it comes to the federal government, is. So she, in the clip that we played, I mean, essentially, yeah, that's like the textbook definition. That's what they want to tell you in school. And, oh, this is just easy. And then a law, how a bill becomes a law. Like, I don't know if anybody has seen, there was a cartoon, I don't know if they still play it when I was a kid, of how a bill becomes a law, and you have the bill and how it goes around and all this shit. But they fail to mention how things get caught up in committee, the percentage of something getting passed is very low, unless it's, of course, something that certain people want to get through. And we'll get into some studies on that as well. So, of course, you have first in the federal government, you have the legislative branch. So, and none of these follow the Constitution anyway. They've done this a long time ago, taken over things that belong to the states. So you have the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, and I don't believe in the Constitution anyway, because I don't think it gives true freedom. So I don't think it goes far enough. And at the same time, it's a piece of paper. And as I've said before, once you give power to other people over you, they're going to take more and more power, and no piece of paper is going to stop them. However, there is ways to have true checks and balances, and I'll get to that later. But so on the legislative branch, I keep wanting to say Blanche, like from the Golden Girls or something. The legislative branch, you have Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives, and this is where they talk about gerrymandering. It sounds like gerrymandering, but it's GERRY, where they change the section or the district. So you have all these voting districts depending on the state. Like, so in Nevada, we only have 4. So, like, one of them, it's kind of funny because you have, like, 3 that have parts of the Las Vegas metropolitan area. And then I think you have 1 that's, like, everything else. And they might even have a little of Las Vegas as well because it's based on population. So what they can do is the legislature can change around each district. And, of course, the Democrats are saying, well, we're losing seats because they're changing the way the districts are set up and they're trying to lump Republican districts. I don't know what the rules are specifically. I know that they all have to touch each other. It's not like you can take, well, we're going to take these districts from over here and put them in, because that would make no sense. But they all, it's like a clump of whatever, but it's just like, it's splitting up the state on the map, essentially, and splitting it up based on the amount of reps each state gets. So there's 435. From what I understand, that has not gone up in like 50 years or I don't know how long. But it hasn't gone up for a long time, even though the population has gone up. So you would think if the population goes up, the representative should go up. It hasn't. I don't know if there's been such a depopulation or a population decrease in one state and an increase in another where they moved a representative from one state to another. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably happened, but I just don't know. But if there was a huge population decrease in one state and a huge increase in another, I would think that they would have to do that to balance it out. But I believe it's up to the legislature itself what the voting districts are. So I'd have to find out more specifically on that. And this, again, I'm talking about federal. So like I said, Nevada, we get 4, and there are 3 that have part of Las Vegas. I think there are 2 that are pretty much all of Las Vegas, and then the other 2 have part of Las Vegas, or one has part of Las Vegas and other territory, and then the other one has the rest of the state, essentially, whatever's after that. So that's how it goes in every state. And this, of course, if you remember your history, was the Great Compromise by Roger Sherman from Connecticut. And I remember this because we did our 6th grade musical on it, and the state by state confederate. So they wanted to, the Senate is set up so every state, I'm sure there's people that don't know this. The Senate is set up where it's supposed to be even, and that was the difference is in the Senate, everybody has equal, each state has an equal say because each state has two representatives of that state, 2 senators, no matter what. And then in the House of Representatives, it's all based on population. However, you have a lot more. You have 435. So to pass something, you have to go through a lot more people, whereas in the Senate, you have 100 because it's just 2 for each state. So if they added a state, they would have to add 2 more Senate seats and whatever amount of reps based on, or maybe they wouldn't add any and they'd just redo the amount that each state gets. I don't know. I don't know what the rules are for that. So that's the setup of Congress. So you think it is, and again, this is on the federal level, on the state level, it's similar. But whether you're voting on a state or federal level, with the exception of maybe New Hampshire when you're talking about the state, because from what I understand, they have like 400 reps or something. So like each rep represents like 3,000 people. So that's pretty small. I mean, it's still 3,000 people, but compared to like 300,000. So I know when I was looking at my district for Las Vegas, it was something like 20,000 or something like that, or maybe 12,000. So it wasn't that huge, but it's still a lot of people. So, and being a state rep, especially when you have that many reps, how important is your vote anyway? It doesn't really mean much. So you could say that, well, we're well represented because each person only represents 3,000 people, like in New Hampshire, but then you have like 400 reps or whatever, and it's hard to get the majority of those people to vote for something. So either way, if you have it where there's a lot of people voting for one spot or there's a small amount of people voting for one spot, it's going to be hard no matter how you look at it. And how you can look at that and say, especially on a federal level, state level, again, it's a little easier. I think you can have more say, especially and I'm kind of skipping a part here because you also have the county level or the city level as well. So you have your city government. So that's even smaller. So the smaller it is, the more say you have and the more you can make an impact. Like if you want to campaign for somebody or do something like that. In a big city like Las Vegas, where Clark County, the metropolitan area, if you count North Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Henderson, and Boulder City, and unincorporated Las Vegas, it's like 2.5 million or something like that. It may be a little less, but it's over 2 million. So that's obviously a lot of people, even when you break those races down. When you're talking about a small town, it's less, but there's only so much they can do as well. I think in a smaller town, you have less power in a sense because you have less people and less things that are going on in a small town compared to a big city. But when you look at on a federal level, and this is where this is just such bullshit to me, and I hear about elections and how people are like talking about who they're going to vote for, and to me, essentially, your vote doesn't mean shit. It's pointless. But if you take, say, Nevada as a example, and I think pretty much all the states are going to be the same when it comes to the federal House of Representatives. So if you take 435, I think what I came out to is something like it represented, and it's not going to be exactly the same, but it should be somewhere in this area, like 300,000 people. So maybe it's 500,000, maybe it's 400,000, maybe it's 6, but it's somewhere in that vicinity for each rep. So yes, we know everybody doesn't vote, not everyone's over 18, but even if you take half, or go even lower and say 100,000 are actually people that are registered to vote. I mean, 100,000 people, that's really not going to do much. And I've talked about this a little before, which I bring up a lot, that I've talked about this before because I don't want people to think that I haven't talked about something before when I have. And like I'm repeating myself, like, oh, I don't remember talking about that. But I've actually talked about this a lot. But for those who haven't heard my spiel on this is, okay, so you go through the whole, I guess there's two routes you can take. You can say you get involved in politics and you even get on a campaign. And I had somebody that I am personally friends with who ran for Congress, ran for the House of Representatives, and they got the nomination and everything. And I was going to work on their campaign, and that was something that I felt like I couldn't because it's not something I believe in. So it would have, for me, been against my personal beliefs, and I would have had an internal conflict on it. Plus, there were certain things that they didn't even agree with that I said, like drugs. I mean, they wouldn't come out and say that they were for the legalization of drugs because, of course, they got other people that might turn them off. So I used to think, well, maybe that you can use the system to defeat the system, which sounds like it doesn't make any sense at all, right? Use the system to defeat the system. But I got to a point where it was like, there's no point in using their system to try to tear down their system, because they built their system so it can't be torn down or teared down based on their setup. It's like playing a game that's rigged where the rules are already in their favor. So I don't think that's the way to change things, is by working within a system that they built, that they have every advantage, and that I don't believe in anyway, because the whole thing would be to get rid of the system totally. And how you would do that using the system, I don't know. Plus, I think it would be hypocritical to do something that I don't believe in. So, but anyway, going back to people that do, so you get involved in a campaign, you put all this time and effort, and then first the person has to get nominated. So they have created a system where, unless you're a Democrat or Republican, your chances of winning are like 0.001 or something. Not counting, you had the people that were already in there that said, oh, I didn't get my nomination, so I'm going to run as an independent, like Lieberman and people like that. So them notwithstanding, because really they just did it so they could get elected. It wasn't, and they were already in there. And so I don't really look at them as true independents, people that came up as independents. But you have to join one of these parties if you actually want to win. There's no way. Or be a billionaire. I guess you could do that too. Excuse me, I keep coughing here, so I don't want to cough on air. So you have those two things there. So you go and campaign for this person. You work hard for them to get the nomination. They get the nomination. Great. Then from there, they have to win the actual election, and then say that they actually win the election. Great, we won the election. Then you have things that you want to see passed, that you want to change things. You want to have, say, more freedom in certain areas, and you want them, being that you worked on their campaign, all you wanted in return was, well, I want you to submit some of my bills or try to submit them. And maybe once they get elected, they're like, fuck you, I got other things to do first. Of course, they don't say it like that. They're a politician. So they say it in a way that's political, that, oh, definitely I'm going to get to it. I got to get settled in. I got to do this. I got to do that. whatever. So you have that part of it. Then if you can actually convince them just to even write one bill, or say you wrote the bill, but submit one bill, and then they have to get, depending on where you are, if you're in Congress on a federal level or on a state level, they have to get enough votes for this thing to pass. And it has to pass their, I don't know what you'd call them, their House or their Senate or their section. And then you got to get it over to the other side, and then they have to pass it. So you look at what you have to go through. And then in between, there's so much more things where first it has to go like to like commission or something. Not commission. It goes somewhere first. There's a word that I'm looking for that I can't think of. And then it may sit there for a while. And then it may never get out. Committee. I was like, I know it sounds like commission. Committee. So it could sit in committee forever and never get voted on. It could get out and get voted on, but most likely nothing's going to happen. So you put all this time into this for what? Basically for nothing, and nothing happens. There was was this a study or a poll? There was something, either a study or a poll, I'm trying to find the information, where 90 to 95%, so they took, I know what it was from. It was from a study that they did. So they took what the people wanted and then took that and compared it to the bills that were passed. And essentially, it was something like 90 to 95% were not things the people wanted. It was things that the politicians wanted. Unless you were, one of the elite or some billionaire or whatever, then, that's different, because if you're a big campaign contributor or somebody who's important like that, then they may listen to you. You may get something passed easily. But besides that, the average person, your chances of getting a bill passed aren't too good at all. So you can focus all of your energy on that. I guess there's the other side of it too, is you can just wait for bills to come up and then say, we want to get our people to vote no on this bill. So you call your senators, you have 2 of them, there's 98 more. And then most senators will not take calls from people they don't represent. And the same with representatives. So in the House of Representatives, you have 1. So you have like 4 people that actually represent you, supposedly. You have the president, who represents the whole country. You have your representative in the House out of the 435. And you have your 2 senators. So you can call the president, you're not going to get to, so wouldn't even bother. You can call your representative, and then you can call your 2 senators if you like, or write them a letter, and then, they'll have one of their staff write back to you, or they'll have like a letter that's kind of already, like a form letter or something like that they'll send to you. I caught one just straight up lying about stuff, and then I wrote him back, and of course he never addressed my lie. So, and again, this is, I don't do any of this shit anymore. I had like a very short period where I didn't do any campaigning or anything like that, but I did write letters or emails to senators and my representative. So you can do that. You can wait for all these bills. And there's a website that has, I forget the name of it, but you can search for it and it should be easy to find, that it gives you every bill that's going through Congress. So it's a lot easier to track these things. But you don't know, there's so many things that you're not even going to know that get put in there last minute, or they don't release the bill until right before they vote on it, or until after they vote on it, or they change the text, or they add something like the NDAA, which gets passed every year, the National Defense Authorization Act, and then they add something stupid that has nothing to do with it at the end just so they can get it in there. So if you're looking at how things are run in Congress, it's pretty much however they want to run them. It's the politicians doing whatever the fuck they want. Now, there's always you can vote them out. It's something like 90% that run again get reelected. Once you get in there, it's hard to get people out. It's because of the same, support system and the whole, essentially, I think all those are rigged. And again, I don't think they're rigged in a sense of the votes are rigged, but just based on the amount of money, the two-party system. If you're not part of one of those parties, you just get a candidate put in front of you. So there's all of these things that give them the benefit of staying in there, of course. And a lot of people just, stay with the incumbent. So essentially in the legislature, I don't really think there's anything you can change. Even if you're in it, there's not much you can change. So, because the same way, it's how much power these guys obviously have a lot more power than a normal person. And depending on who you are, you may be able to get people to vote for something you want them to vote on, and you do a favor for them next time and all of that stuff. But it depends on who you are as well. So there's all this deal making stuff and a lot of deal making between the parties. Like I had asked, how can you get a whole budget passed? Well, because you have a two-party system. If you had everyone that was in there was not part of a party, you'd never get a budget passed. And I think that's a good thing because you'd fund things as they come up. You'd have a bill, should we fund this? Yes. No. But you have this two-party system. I think some people don't realize the ramifications of that, where they're able to control everything because of the two-party system, because they can make deals based on party, and the majority just fall in line. The other thing that they were able to do is there was a rulemaking law. I think it was either in the 60s or the 40s or maybe before that. But the rulemaking law is where they were able to give the authority to make laws to government agencies. So that's not anywhere actually in the Constitution, but I guess it doesn't matter. And how would anybody take that to court anyway? Because I had mentioned standing, and I'll get into it more when we get to the judicial branch, but you can't just take a law to the Supreme Court and say it's unconstitutional. Something has to happen where that law directly affects you and you have standing. So if something today was passed and it was unconstitutional, but it didn't affect you at all, you can't sue and get something in the Supreme Court. that law would somehow have to affect you. So if it's a criminal law, you'd have to get arrested for that law. And then you'd have to go through this whole big process to see if they even take the case, and it's a whole big thing. But we'll get to that in a couple minutes. I mentioned the Princeton study that unless you're one of the elites, basically what the people want doesn't end up getting passed anyway. And then you look at how many bills and when is it going to stop? Because every year there's more and more and more bills. And there are so many bills, they don't even know how many bills there are. But you're expected to know all this shit. And it's just going to keep adding and adding. It's not like they're taking anything away. You don't need all these laws, but they're in the business of lawmaking. And I'm going to talk about that a little later, where it's basically just a big fucking circle of lawmaking. The main job, of course, of the legislative branch is to make laws. I mean, that's what they do. Now, think about that. If their main job is to make laws, if they're not making laws, then I guess they're not doing their job. And you hear about, oh, well, this senator or this rep, they haven't passed any bills or submitted any bills. When I hear that, I'm like, good. But they want you to think, oh, that's bad because we need to add laws. So it's like you have all these fucking people there. You have 535 people sitting there thinking, what the fuck can we add? How can we add this? Instead of having people looking at what the fuck can we get rid of, you have people sitting there saying, what can we add that we can't keep track of, that we don't even know what the fuck is going on? So, and there's no constitutional check. As I was just saying, you have to have standing and it goes after the fact. So they could pass any fucking law they want. I mean, the president has to sign off on it. But between the president and Congress, they can pass whatever they want. It doesn't have to be constitutional. It's up to them. Hey, we're going to pass a law that says everybody has to be home by 9 o'clock in the whole fucking country. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something. Whatever it might be. Everybody has to be castrated. But they can pass whatever they want. And the check and balance on that is supposed to be the president. That's the check and balance. And then say they passed a law that one of the branches, they cut off your branch. And that was the law that once you reach a certain age, they cut off your branch. So, or the, what is beneath your branch. So they castrate people after age 40 or something, for example, and they passed that law. Now, you can't do anything about that until after they castrate you. Then you can take it to the Supreme Court and try to change the law where it's really only going to help other people, but you're missing your balls. And they look at that as a check and balance. So let me go through the executive branch and then talk about how where's the fucking check and balance really? I mean, they're all government. First of all, I look at it as, and this goes beyond just these three branches. It goes to all these agencies and a lot of other parts of government, but they're all government. As I was saying, they're a big corporation called government. The U.S. government, not called government, but called the U.S. government, is one big corporation. Now think of that in terms of some other corporation. Do you feel that like Walmart has checks and balances because they have a board of directors and then they have a manager or any company? Do they really have checks and balances? Well, yeah, they have fighting within the companies where people are battling probably for positions and stuff like that, are battling to run the company. But ultimately, that's within the company. Outside of the company, does that affect anything? Does it help anybody? So what I'm saying is that they may have what they call checks and balances within the company, but that's within the company. But their goals don't change. Their goals are to up the stock price. So even though there may be infighting in the company, there may be people trying to take it over, there may be people getting fired or fighting for the CEO position or board of directors or whatever. But the goal to up the stock price and make more money never changes. So anything that conflicts with that is going to be dealt with. And a lot of stuff is just going to be dealt with internally, and you're not going to hear about it anyway. So as the executive branch, as far as how it relates to the legislative branch, is mainly they either veto or sign off on a bill. And of course, everybody knows that 2/3, they can override a veto with 2/3. So essentially, if there's a bill that Congress really wants to pass, the president can't even stop them neither, whether it's unconstitutional or not. Now, granted, you look at it and say, well, it has to go through 535 people, but 2/3 of that is what? If you divide 3 by 535, I don't know. I'm not have a calculator in front of me, but it's about, 1 something would be minus, like 400 or something like that. No, less than that, maybe like 3 something. So the president, of course, is the commander-in-chief of the military, controls the military, which is the strongest and most funded times 100 treaties, but they have to be approved, I believe, by Congress or just the Senate. I know most appointments just go through the Senate. They appoint all the secretaries, cabinet positions, all of that. So he picks them, they appoint them. There's something in the Constitution that says he has to give a State of the Union address every so often, and they do the yearly State of the Union address. He can pardon people. He is able to make executive orders. Now, this is another thing where there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you can write an executive order. From what I understand, it somehow came out of the General Welfare Clause, and it's supposed to only have to do with the execution of a law. And I think that's how they were able to get away with it, because it was, okay, well, this executive order is actually executing a law that was signed by or passed by Congress. But other than that, all this other shit that they just pass executive orders for, they're not supposed to be able to do it. But it sounds like Obama's gonna, before he leaves, try to put through a bunch of executive orders. And I don't think any executive order has ever been challenged. I think one. So every executive order that was passed or put into effect, I guess, because it's not really passed, it still exists. So you keep adding to the executive orders, just like you keep adding to the fucking laws. Of course, he appoints the cabinet, the secretaries. They're all approved by the Senate. I believe the heads of all these agencies, and all these agencies report to him. The main thing that the president is supposed to do is execute the laws that Congress passes. Of course, we don't really see that, but that's all right. I'm supposed to execute them, but I might just execute Congress instead because I don't care. And then I'm starting to sound like Yogi Bear. Hey, boo-boo. The judicial branch is pretty fucked up. Of course, the highest court in the land being the Supreme Court, which is the federal level. But you do have a whole bunch of federal, I forget what they call them, but there's a whole court system with a bunch of federal courts based on the region. So there's like regional federal courts, but they have a name for them. So, and then of course the last court is the Supreme Court. So lower courts can rule something to be unconstitutional, but you have to have standing. So again, if Congress passes a law, nobody can do anything about it. It doesn't matter whether it follows the Constitution or not. You have to have standing, so it somehow has to affect you. Like I said, if it's a criminal law, you have to be arrested for it. Then they don't take that many cases. There's thousands of cases that they don't take. I had the Nevada Supreme Court deny my case that I tried to bring to them. So I could have appealed to the actual Supreme Court, but then it would have cost me a lot of money. You also got to think of that too. The amount of money that it costs to get all the way to the Supreme Court is a ridiculous amount of money. Now, if you win in the Supreme Court, you may be able to sue to get some of it back. But if you don't, you probably won't get any of it back, and you'll probably spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. It's insane. So the normal person can't get justice unless somebody wants to pick it up pro bono. And they design the laws on purpose so they're so open-ended. And we'll get to that in a minute. The Supreme Court, there's 9 Supreme Court judges. They're appointed by the president, approved by Congress. They are appointed for life. And they use precedent usually, just like all other courts, which means they use prior cases. Now, this makes no sense to me, but supposedly, from what I understand, they'd even take precedent sometimes over, a lot of the time, over what it actually says in the Constitution, because everything's open-ended and open to interpretation. So that's what I was going to go into, that you have this circle of fucking laws, and it's on purpose. Because if you think about it, and I've said this before, that the average person with average intelligence should, in theory, be able to defend themselves on most charges. Maybe if it's something very complicated and very serious, like if you have a murder case where there's a lot of complication in it and you feel that you need a lawyer or something. But for any misdemeanor or minor misdemeanor, why should anybody need a lawyer? Why should the laws be structured in a way that it's so fucking complicated that you need a lawyer? Well, they did that on purpose, obviously. And, I can go back and read through the Constitution as far as what it says about courts and how much they actually added in to how courts are supposed to be set up. And I don't remember, off the top of my head, but it's not just the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is different in that the Supreme Court is almost a jury deciding whether a case is constitutional or unconstitutional. And it's a majority rule. You have 5 people have to decide. They're all part of political parties. They're political nominees. And these people decide whether something's constitutional or not. And you should read some of the decisions and why. Because every time they make a decision, you have somebody writing for the side that passed and somebody writing for the side that didn't, and their rationale as to why. I talked about the DUI case, and it was essentially, yes, it's unconstitutional, but the upside to it is worth it, essentially. I mean, they didn't word it that way, but that's how I interpreted it when I had read the decision. So you essentially have this circle of lawyers, laws, courtrooms, Congress, because you have most politicians are lawyers, number one. And I think this is all by design, but who knows? So most politicians are lawyers, right? So they go and they write all these laws, like I said, pretty much open-ended. And when I say open-ended, or more open to interpretation, so you can look at a law, and if they wanted it to, they could have it be pretty specific. They could write laws that are very specific if they wanted to. The whole thing is that they purposely write these laws that are open to interpretation, so different judges can interpret it different ways, different prosecutors can interpret it different ways, people in Congress can interpret it differently, and all of that can happen. So, and what it does is they create a whole bunch of new fucking jobs too. Because what happens? Well, you need more lawyers. Everybody needs a lawyer now because they keep more and more laws and more complicated laws to understand. You know, you read these bills and most people are like, what the fuck? Then you have within the bill, a whole bunch of definitions as, well, this means this for this. But it might not really mean that in terms of if you look up the word in a fucking dictionary. But for the purposes of the bill, you need like an appendix or something to go and understand all the words that are mentioned in the bill and what they mean. So essentially, again, they make it so you need a lawyer. So, we got to keep the lawyer thing going where people need more and more lawyers. And, of course, more criminal laws, more people getting arrested, they need more lawyers. They need more prosecutors. So you have lawyers become judges, become members of the House, members of the Senate, and it's just a big circle. And they don't have to do it that way. The other reason I think they do it that way is because they want convictions. So all these lawyers are friends. They all know each other. They make deals with each other, all of that stuff. So your lawyer's going to probably screw you over anyway because they're friends with the judge. They're friends with the prosecutor. So unless you're somebody important. Then the prosecutor can present it in one way and your lawyer can present it in another way. And with all the instructions given to the juries now by judges that are, you know, they ignore the jury nullification laws, and not laws, but there's precedent for jury nullification. And they instruct them that you only look at this or that or whatever. It's not coincidence that most people get found guilty that take cases to trial. And it's 90 to 95% of cases are pled out. And then maybe I confused those numbers, sorry, with my other one. Well, I think on the other study, it didn't give me an actual percentage. It's just a majority, like that the people aren't getting past what they want. But this was an actual percentage that I got, that 90 to 95% of people plead out. Because what happens is, one thing they do now is they stack charges. So it means like if you're arrested for one thing, they're going to find every charge that they can add on there. It's called stacking. So then they have a better chance of you pleading guilty or making a deal because they have the other charges to hold over your head. If you're not guilty of one, they can probably find you guilty of something. So they have that. They totally have the advantage in every area. It's so fucked up. I mean, their advantage is ridiculous. It's like a pro football team playing a Pop Warner team. That's the type of advantage they have. And so you have that happening. So most people will plead out. When they plead out, of course, the prosecution, gets their win. Essentially, they get their conviction. The other thing is, if you take it to trial, they're going to give you the maximum sentence, or they're going to punish you, essentially, for taking it to trial. So whatever they were going to offer you, they're not going to give you that. They're going to give you something more serious because you actually challenged them. So it's you're guilty until proven innocent is what it is. And you actually, that whole just, reasonable doubt, no, you need to be proven innocent. And that whole system is rigged like a motherfucker too. And that's what I mean. If 90 to 95% of cases are pled out, that means their conviction rate is at least 95%. And then the 5% that go to trial, how many of those actually get off? And if you have a judge, so in Nevada, if it's a minor misdemeanor, if the maximum penalty is 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine, you can't even get a jury. How fucked up is that? I thought that was pretty clear in the Constitution that you get a jury for all criminal cases. Well, it doesn't say for all criminal cases, but you would think for a criminal case, you'd get a jury. But no, you get a judge. And if it's your word against the cop, doesn't matter. Even if you have physical evidence, doesn't matter. They're going to, unless you got it on videotape, they're always going to take the cop's word. Even though in life, you could be more trustworthy, you could present character witnesses, you could get all of these recommendations throughout from whoever throughout your life, and teachers that you had and whatever. And this fucking cop, who the only thing that he has to show is that he was accepted into the police academy and got a job as a cop, that's good enough. That's all he has. And he could have a fucked up record too as a cop, but you can't bring that up. That's all he has to be. And his word means more than yours. And you're going to tell me that this is not a rigged system? Never mind that. What about the fact that the courtroom is set up where the judge is up there higher than you? They can find you in contempt of court for ridiculous things like wearing a hat or not following an order or speaking out of turn or some ridiculous shit like that. A courtroom is more authoritarian than any other aspect of government. Your chance, well, that's not totally true because there's people who got arrested at county commission meetings, I guess I had saw in one state. But your chances of getting caught in contempt of court and going to jail in a courtroom is probably more, you have a better chance of going to jail in that situation than you do if you were at speaking at Congress or being around the president somehow. I don't know. But that's how fucked up it is. So then you have all of this Nobody learns any of this in school. You have kids, teenagers, kids in their early 20s that don't know anything about this. They don't know their rights. They totally get screwed over. They just want to get out of jail. Then they get things on their record. They get their life fucked up. All just because of this fucked up system. This is not, this whole idea that this is some great system is a bunch of fucking bullshit. Because you have people that said, well, if you just followed the Constitution. And I'll make sure I go back and read up more on what it says about the judicial branch. And then I guess I'll try to use that in a court, and they'll probably find me in contempt, and I'll have to go to jail. That's what they can do. This is not a joke. And I've played these, they can essentially throw you in jail for this one woman. They threw her in jail for a year for, she was being wise with the judge. But that's it. But I mean, so she should go to jail. And I know you have you people out there, you fuckers, that would say, well, you should have respect for a judge. Why? Basically, a judge is somebody who couldn't make it as a lawyer anyway, but, you didn't have respect for the judge, so you deserve to go to jail. So you have people that have that opinion that judges can do whatever they want and should be able to do whatever they want. So here's actually a clip of, I can't find that one. This one is a guy calling the judge a cock. So we're going to take a quick break anyway, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the branches of government and the separation of power and how really that's just an illusion, and what would be an actual separation of power. Nonpartisan liberty for all.
Brian Novall.
In jail.
Sir, you were charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence battery. The court finds probable cause of their priors on what is this case? Okay, what's that case for? What's the case number? What are they? Got it. So it says he went after somebody with a knife. Apparently, it looks like from the police report he was trying to snort or smoke some. I didn't know. How do you smoke prescription medication? Is that when you grind it up and you put it in a pipe?
Yes,
I think that's it. I think you grind up oxycodones and you.
Never heard of someone smoking.
It says it right here. It said he was trying to smoke his.
I remember my father, and there was no weapon.
All right. Well, whatever. Okay. Based on the facts of the case, going after someone with a knife, court finds there is a danger to the victim. Court's going to set count 1 at $10,000. Count 2, court's going to set that bond at $10,000. Court's going to order he has no direct or indirect contact with Jesus Noval. No direct or indirect contact. Must stay 500 feet away from him at all times. I'm going to order that he's not in possession of any guns, weapons, firearms, or ammunition. Court's also going to revoke his bond on 098502 CF10. You're going to be held no bond, sir, until further order of the court. Thank you.
kidding me?
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding you. That's the truth. You're not going anywhere. That's the truth. All right, thanks. All right, Suzanne
My
Walt.
charger was battery.
Oh, wow, I know, man. But that's the way life is. What did he say? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring him back. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring that guy back. Bring him back. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, bring that guy back.
You want him back, Joe?
Yeah, I want him back right now.
That wasn't good, but that's
So what did you just say when you walked away?
I called you a because you're... That's
Did
not
you?
my charges I had yesterday.
Okay, hold on a second,
I had
sir.
a battery charge.
Sir, this court is inclined to hold you in contempt of court, and I want to know from you, give me a reason why I should not hold you in contempt of court.
I don't see a reason why you shouldn't, because
Okay.
there's not a reason this should be here.
Okay, sir, I find you in contempt of court for using that type of language with the court you just used. And before I pass sentence on you, I'm going to ask you if you have anything to say before I pass sentence.
I apologize, I was out of line. I'm just upset because this is not what I was charged with yesterday.
Okay,
I
sir.
was charged with a battery.
I accept your apology, and I will sentence you to 60 days in the Broward County Jail. Thank you.
Can I take the back in?
All right, sir, hold it. Come on back. Come on back, sir. Sir, I'm going to... Sir, I'm inclined to hold you in contempt of court again. Would you like to tell me why I should not hold you in contempt of court for the last thing you just said?
I asked if you're allowed to do that for me.
All right,
saying
sir.
talk.
I find you in contempt of court for the second time you said that. Do you have anything else you'd like to say in mitigation of the second sentence I'm about to hand down?
I was just asking my attorney if he can do that.
All right, sir, you have nothing. I'm going to send you to another 60 days to run consecutive to the prior 60 days. So now you're up to 120 days in the Broward County Jail. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Nah.
All right, sir, thank you very much. You're done.
I didn't even know you can do that.
All right, thank you. All right, I think you should move along. So it's going to be 60 plus 60, okay, to run consecutive. Thank you.
He's got no body anyways.
Yeah. I'm sure he was addressing his attorney out loud in front of the microphone in front of the court. I think he's a smart. I think he's a smart. No, that's no big deal, but I think he needed to have a message that he can't do that in the courtroom, all right?
The Constitution of the United States divides the federal government into three separate branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch contains the Congress of the United States, which is divided into two chambers, which is called a bicameral Congress. The executive branch contains the President of the United States along with the Vice President, and the judicial branch contains the Supreme Court along with the inferior courts. The Founding Fathers of the United States gave each of the three branches of the government specific and unique enumerated powers. The legislative branch of the federal government had the power to lay and collect taxes, use of the public treasury, establish inferior courts, the power of impeachment, and provide for the general welfare and the common defense of the nation. The executive branch of the United States is vested in a president. The president is the commander-in-chief of the United States military, is in charge of making treaties with foreign nations with the advice and consent of the Senate, appointing all civil officers of the United States, which includes executive department heads and Supreme Court judges, also with the advice and consent of the Senate, and executing all laws that are passed by Congress. The United States Constitution then creates a third branch, the judicial branch, which is vested in the United States Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court has jurisdiction over all federal laws passed by the U.S. Congress, treaties made by the executive branch, all trials involving public ministers, maritime jurisdiction, all trials where the United States is a party, and controversies involving 2 or more states. This concept of 3 separate branches is called the separation of powers, originally derived from Baron Charles de Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws. It is a common assumption today that these branches are what you call co-equal branches, that is, each branch is not more powerful than the other. It is true that these branches do have the ability to check each other, but it is not true that each branch holds the same amount of power. In fact, there is a strongest, middle, and weakest branch. A basic look at the Constitution and a look at the Federalist Papers will reveal the strongest, middle, and weakest branches. Without a doubt, the strongest of the 3 branches is the legislative branch. In the Constitution, the Founding Fathers devoted nearly 50% of the entire Constitution to Article 1, which contains everything about the legislative branch. In Article 1, Section 8 alone, the Congress is given 17 enumerated powers. These powers do not include enumerated powers granted to them elsewhere in the Constitution, like the powers of impeachment and the powers over inferior courts. The Congress of the United States was given this strong authority because it is the branch of government that is closest to the people. Now, this does not mean that the Congress has unlimited authority. The Congress is a body of specific enumerated powers, and there is 8 clauses in Article 1, Section 9 completely devoted to the limitations on Congress. The executive branch of the United States is the second strongest branch. The head of the executive branch is, of course, the President of the United States. The Founding Fathers were very careful about not to put too much power into the hands of one man, as they experienced that tyranny over the American Revolution with the King of Great Britain. This problem is expressed in Federalist No. 69 by Alexander Hamilton. He explains that the President's power can be checked by the United States Congress. For instance, the President of the United States may veto any bills passed by Congress, but Congress has the authority to override the presidential veto by authority of 2/3 of both houses of Congress. The President of the United States is given command over the armed forces of the United States, but the power of creating, regulating, and financing the armed forces is exclusively given to Congress, not the President. In any treaty signed by the President, or any presidential appointments of civil officers, ambassadors, public ministers, or judges by the President must be approved by a 2/3 majority of the United States Senate. Now, these are just a few of the powers of the President that can be checked by the United States Congress. Now, this doesn't mean that the President is powerless. The greatest power in the Union is given to the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces. He is also the head executive of the executive branch. The third, final, and weakest branch of the United States federal government is the judicial branch. Out of the first 3 articles of the United States Constitution containing the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, Article 3 containing the judicial branch is by far the shortest and smallest of the 3 articles, containing very few enumerated powers given to the judicial branch. This was purposely done by the Founding Fathers because the judicial branch is the branch of government that is the farthest away from the people. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist No. 78 explains all of this very thoroughly. He states, "Whoever attentively considers the different departments of power must perceive that, in a government in which they are separated from each other, the judiciary, from the nature of its functions, will always be the least dangerous to the political rights of the Constitution, because it will be least in a capacity to annoy or injure them. The executive not only dispenses the honors, but holds the sword of the community. The legislature not only commands the purse, but prescribes the rules by which the duties and rights of every citizen are to be regulated. The judiciary, on the contrary, has no influence over either the sword or the purse, no direction either of the strength or the wealth of the society, and can take no active resolution whatever. It may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment, and must ultimately depend upon the aid of the executive arm even for the efficacy of its judgments. He continues on to say, this simple view of the matter suggests several important consequences. It proves incontestably that the judiciary is beyond comparison the weakest of the three departments of power, that it can never attack with success either of the other two, and that all possible care is requisite to enable it to defend itself against their attacks. The Congress of the United States is even given significant authority over what's called inferior courts, that is, the Court of Appeals and the federal district courts. The Congress of the United States can create and dismantle these courts as it pleases and can control the jurisdiction of the courts. The power to impeach judges when they exhibit bad behavior is also given to the United States Congress. The President of the United States is also given power over the judiciary branch. The President is the one charged with appointing federal judges to the bench, and not anybody in the judiciary. Now, this does not mean that the federal judiciary is completely powerless. It is charged with enforcing and interpreting the federal laws of the United States. But any ruling by the federal judiciary can ultimately be ignored by the executive and legislative branches. As Hamilton explained in Federalist 78, the courts have no way of enforcing its rulings on the other two branches, and subsequently don't have to follow them. In conclusion, the United States Constitution creates the legislative, the executive, and judicial branches, three separate branches of government, each having specific enumerated powers. Each of the branches do have the ability to check each other, but some branches have more power than others and therefore are not co-equal branches. The most authority is given to the legislative branch. The legislative branch has the ability to check both the executive and the judicial branches. The least authority, however, is given to the judicial branch. While can theoretically check the other two branches, it does not have the ability to force the other two branches to follow its rulings.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. NonPartisanLibertyForall.com. That excuse me. First of all, I wanted to talk about the clip which I had played a lot of times with a guy called the Judge of Cock. It's obvious. I mean, you look at the ego and the attitude of the judge, you're going to spend 120 days because he said it was consecutive. When it's concurrent, you can serve them at the same time. 120 days just because he called him a cock. And then he asked about, can he do that? And obviously, so what if the guy was trying to be a wise ass or he was just like not taking it seriously or whatever? He's already got a charge there. And because in your court, he said cock, you're going to put him in jail for 120 days. How fucked up is that? Now, that doesn't mean that later they may reduce it or I don't know what actually had happened there, but I've heard other clips that I have where it's the same thing. And I've been in courtrooms. If you don't basically kiss the judge's ass, then you could be found in contempt of court. And what right does a judge have or expectation that you're supposed to be there happy? Because, first of all, that was an arraignment. And he hasn't been convicted of anything. That's just being charged with something. So really this whole innocent until proven guilty is such bullshit. But people are going to jail for these little fucking victimless crimes that aren't crimes as far as I'm concerned. they're only crimes because a government that has more guns and a bigger army than everyone else says they are. But in reality, they're not crimes. And you're sitting in court, and because you say something that the judge gets offended, then he's going to put you in jail. This other woman who was wising off to the judge, he gave her a year in jail. I mean, it's insane that judges can do this. And they can even do it in a way where you don't have to be in the courtroom. So what had happened to Mark Schmitter, I've talked about the story before. He's been on the show. He got found in contempt of court for handing out FIJA material to potential jurors, meaning that anybody could be a potential juror. So this was in Florida. The judge said you can't hand them out in front of the courthouse. But Mark was not in the court when he said it, so how would he even know anyway? So it turned out later that it was a violation of his free speech anyway, but he still ended up going to jail for 6 months over a contempt of court charge. So essentially, Mark always says, well, I didn't go to jail over handing them out. I went over a contempt of court. And, I understand that. But essentially, the reason you violated contempt of court was by giving out flyers or pamphlets or whatever they were. And to say that that he should be in jail for that is insane. And the guy's like 65 or something like that. He's a big activist in Orlando, Florida. And he essentially went to jail for letting people know facts of what rights you have. So this is the type of shit that goes on with the court. Now, I've talked a lot about courts before, especially with my experiences in court. But where I look at this is it's all a government. It's all one big corporation. And there's no separation of powers. Where is the separation of powers? You could say that, well, this is this person's job and this is this person's job. So there you go, separation of powers. That's really what you're doing in a sense, or saying that you people over here, if you go into a company and say, okay, this department over here, you guys do this, and this department over here, you guys do this, and then this department over here, you guys do this. So there you go. There's a separation of powers or duties. And, okay, that can maybe work when you're talking about financial things and fraud and things like that. But when you're talking about a government whose goal is to get as much control and power as possible, they're going to make deals with each other. They're all part of this political system. Even the judges are former, Democrats or Republicans. I don't think they say that when they appoint them, but they're all part of the same system. And essentially Democrats and Republicans are all the same thing. So basically, there's no checks and balances, because who are you supposed to be doing it for? You're supposed to be doing it for the people, right? That it's a check and balance on the rights of the people. So if you think of it that way, it should be a non-government employees that actually do checks and balances, not people that work for the government. It's a conflict of interest. because they all work for the government. And I can't really think of a good corporate analogy, but it would be like, you know, if you had some kind of competition and picked a bunch of people from each corporation to compete against each other. There's no analogy in the conflict of interest, but that those people in that each corporation are going to work together as a team to try to beat those other corporations. So it might not be the best analogy, but what I mean is they're all together is my point, that they're all on the same team. Even though, again, it's just like with police. Police might not always agree with each other. Some of them might hate each other, but they keep all that shit internal and no one knows about it. And when they talk to the press or things come out, you're not going to know about it. Let me read the definition of government, and you can go and look it up at merriam-webster.com. Actually, I'll give you the exact URL, merriam-webster.com/dictionary/government. And you have a whole bunch of definitions, but it pretty much says the same thing. Now, this is a simple definition of government, but like I said, you have some other definitions. They're either nothing to do with government or pretty much the same thing. The group of people who control and make decisions for a country, state, etc. So a group of people who control and make decisions. A particular system used for controlling a country, state, etc. The process or manner of controlling a country, state, etc. It's all control. So it even says it in the definition when you look up government, controlling. And they're all on the same team to control the people of the country that they're in. And I don't know how that's so hard for people to understand, that because you have different people doing things, that somehow means that there's separation of power. Because, if I'm the Congress to pass a law, I got to get the president to sign off on it. Fine. But don't forget that you have all of these other parts of government or agencies that don't fall under any of this. There's not just Congress, the president, and 9 fucking judges, and then all these smaller courts, and then nothing else. It's like if the president wants to get something done, he can call on the FBI, the CIA, the DEA. He can call on all these agencies to fucking do it for him. The Secret Service. So that's not factored in there. Yeah, if you want to actually pass a law, something where there's a record on the books, they have to have the president sign off on it and whatever. And, we didn't pass this law. Essentially, government in general does whatever they want when it comes to the people. You have the courts pretty much doing whatever they want. I went through the interpretation, how 90 to 95% of cases are pled out, so are guilty. That many people, the police are that good? No. They don't want to take a chance. They don't want to take a risk. They know the way they have set things up. It's like you could get, if you plead guilty, you'll get probation. But if you take it to trial, you could get 10 years in jail because we stacked all these fucking charges for the same thing. So the separation of powers is almost irrelevant anyway. or the checks and balances, same thing, separation of powers, checks and balances. It's, you know, the courts, yes, you have some things where they disagree, and to me, it's still part of that illusion of freedom. But for the most part, they're going to get what they want through the courts. As far as Congress and the president, that's where they make it out like, oh, we're, you know, fighting about this and that and whatever. And how many fucking, I mean, really, how many more laws do you fucking need anyway? That would be the only thing that I would even give a little bit to, is the passing of an actual bill and the president not vetoing the bill. But if the majority of Congress wants it, they can get it anyway. But it's still not, to me, a huge check and balance there on, you know, that really means anything in the big picture of things. When it comes to people's freedom and their true freedom and their liberty, anything that has to do with keeping the people, quote unquote, in line or under control or any of those things, most of those things are going to go right through, and they do. Look at the NDAA, the one in 2012, where they added the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens. So I know it doesn't actually say of U.S. citizens, but that's how they, you know, which they were doing anyway. So what the fuck is the difference? And that's part of it too, is they were doing it anyway. So who the fuck cares? But when it comes to the big whatever or whoever's plan, whether it's the corporations, the billionaires, the Illuminati, whatever the fuck you want to call them, the Council on Foreign Relations, when it comes to that plan and what they want to put through, is there are no checks and balances. They're all part of, you know, there might be a couple senators or people in the House here and there, but not enough to make a difference. And it's all by design. So when we look at these definitions, it really speaks to, I know it's just a definition from a dictionary, but it really speaks to what government is. Now, some people would say that government is there to protect the people, and that's the first thing that I would think of that people would say. Not that I think they're there to protect the people, but that's what they say all the time. They've been saying that, especially since the so-called terrorist attack, that they're here to protect the people. And yet we're here. That's one of our main goals. Because what are the goals of government when it comes to the people? What is the purpose of government? Now, there was a study in Princeton, I had mentioned this, that essentially the United States is an oligarchy. Now, what is an oligarchy? Same thing from Merriam-Webster. And they used to make actual dictionaries. I don't know if they still, I'm sure they still make print dictionaries, but they're also online. And the main definitions are a government controlled by a small group of people. Oh, that's the main. I only took the one, but there's probably a few of them, but that was the main one. And I think they all the ones that had to do with government pretty much said the same thing. But it means that the votes of Congress and bills passed don't reflect the actual opinions of the people. As I have said earlier, there was another study where it might have been part of the same study, but the other part which had said that the majority of what's passed is not what people want. Now, there's certain things that people have no business in getting involved in, and those are the victimless crimes and things like that. But when it comes to, I'm trying to think of something that people should have a say in, or even the government should have a say in. I don't really think the government should have a say in anything. I don't think they should fucking exist. I don't know. What does the government do for you? I look at my day and, you know, of course, part of it's from looking at websites or listening to the radio, but they're constantly talking about government. You know, government's doing this and government's doing that. And should it be to the point that government is so fucking big that you can't, you know, maybe if I don't leave the house and don't turn on any TV that has commercials, then I can avoid anything about government. But my point being, you know, obviously it's good that they report on government. Now, it would be better if when they reported on government, they actually did their job and didn't just report on what Obama told them to report on. I'm going to try to eat a cheesecake while I'm on the mic. That might not work because if it's making too much noise, I'm going to stop. But it seems like, you know, government is so fucking big and there's so many things going on with it, which there really shouldn't be. This is some good cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory. That, you know, we're constantly hearing about government and the presidential candidates and this and that. And I think about, is it like that everywhere? Do they spend that much time talking about government? And I'm saying there shouldn't be that much spent on government because there shouldn't be anything fucking going on with government to talk about. But of course, there is. So that's what I'm saying. In all of these other countries, because there, you know, there's the other side of it is, well, there's all this shit going on in government, but the country isn't saying anything about it because they're hiding what government does. And of course, you don't want that. So I'm not saying that I don't want to hear about what government does. I do. But what I'm saying is that is government so big that that's really, if you go to, because obviously if you're listening to a political show, that's what you're going to hear about. But if you go to just a regular search engine that has articles, so, excuse me, non-political, a non-political website, because like a search engine, and then they have news. How much there is about government compared to other stuff? And maybe that's a bad example too, because they may be, hey, we don't want to talk about all the fucked up things government is doing. We want to distract people with all the bullshit. So you have that as well. But when it comes down to it, the separation of powers doesn't do anything. It really doesn't, in my opinion. It doesn't separate anything. And then looking at government as what it really is, which is a corporation, these branches are just different departments within it. So, like, oh shit, I got whipped cream on my wire here. So, yeah, I gotta clean this off. So I have like my backup recorder, my H4N handy recorder, and the wire like dipped into my whipped cream on my cheesecake. So, and no, I'm not licking it off. I'm like wiping it off, but it would be fucking sticky. So I gotta get something wet later to wipe it off with. But they're just branches within, they're just departments within it. So if you look at a corporation, it's like, okay, they have the accounting department, and they may have business operations, and they may have accounts receivable. That would be part of accounting probably. And whatever else, collections, whatever else they may have, but they all are on the same team. They all have a common goal for the company to make money, for the company to be successful. So with government, the main goals that I talk about all the time, of course, money is one of them, but it's not money the same way that another company is money, because they want money, but they have to spend all their money. So it's like with government, they can't invest in something where they're not a business in that sense, or a corporation in that sense, where they're trying to boost a stock price or make more money. Now, they want more money coming in. They want a bigger tax base. They want more taxes coming in. But they want money so they can spend all the money, not so they can make it for. It's not like Barack Obama is going to get a bonus because the budget came in at whatever. So, like, there's people that I know that have jobs that, you know, if they meet their sales quota for the month or whatever, or based on what they sold, they'll get a certain bonus. And that money will go directly to them. Whereas with the government, it might go to that department's budget. Actually, it may end up going to them in a sense, but not in the same way where it does at another company, because all the money that they bring in, they have to spend. So you have, it's like you have, especially the end of the year, even though there's only a day left, but they budget, and well, they've probably done their budgets already. If they're on a fiscal year, if they're on a calendar year as opposed to a fiscal year, but they want to all these departments want to be able to increase their budget. So if they get a certain amount of money, they want to make sure they spend all that money, because if they don't, they might get less the next year. Or they might get cuts because, hey, we budgeted this much, and, you know, now we think you're only going to need this much. I think that happens a lot with the roads. Like, I always see them doing road projects on shit that, like, they don't seem to need to be doing it. Now, of course, there's information I could be totally unaware of, but it seems like that they're taking roads that are perfectly fine and like, oh, we need to do this to this road just so they could spend the money. Whereas in a regular business, it's the other way around. You want to come on expenses, you want to come in under budget, not over. On sales, you want to come in over, or revenue. And on expenses, you want to come in under. Well, I guess if you come in under, you could technically lose money as well, but I guess it depends on the company you work for. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll lose money. I'm kind of judging things based on my company, which I don't want to talk about the specifics. And I'm trying to eat cheesecake. So let me play a clip real quick. We'll be right back. NonPartisanLIbertyForall.com.
A lot of people in America don't realize how burdened the western states are by the federal government. In Idaho, 2 out of every 3 acres is owned by the federal government. In Nevada, it is substantially higher than that. We have a county in Idaho that's 97% owned by the federal government. But when you have that, it is very difficult for free people to live and work and do the kinds of things that they want to do when you have a federal government that is intent on and focused on regulating every aspect of our life, and it becomes very difficult. One of the difficulties is over the years, Congress, usually when there was large Democrat majorities, passed these laws that have with them, attached to them, the law of unintended consequences, which happens with every law that's passed. But when you take laws like the Endangered Species Act, which sounds so good when you talk about it, look, we're going to save endangered species. Well, you know, I mean, who could be against that? And so long as there's a reasonable effort to do it, so be it. But one of the very first things that happened under the Endangered Species Act was they put 50,000 loggers and people attached to the lumber industry out of work because of the spotted owl. There's one pair of spotted owls per section of ground, and they closed down hundreds of thousands of acres from reasonable commercial timber harvest. And I mean, if people would have known that, and they would have had that in mind when the vote was actually taken on the floor of the United States Senate or House, I think it probably would have been a different vote. And I think that at the very least, the law would have had much more reasonable parts of it and impact than what it does. In today's world, I mean, if the worst possible nightmare for a rancher or a farmer is finding some endangered species or some threatened species on land that they're trying to be a good steward of. And it really points out one of the problems we're having with this administration is they have totally abandoned the concept that the Founding Fathers had of 3 branches of government. They're trying to be all branches of government rolled into one. Poster child for that, obviously, is the things that they're trying to do with what they call climate change. The cap and trade rule, the Congress, they couldn't even get their own party in Congress to embrace that. When we had a test vote on that in the Senate, it was soundly defeated. And now they're going to do it by rule and regulation. That's not what the Founding Fathers intended. They intended that you have different branches of government, which would be a check and a balance on the other branch of government. Well, when you have one branch trying to do something, the other branch stops them and says, look, we don't want to do that. It's overreach. And then they go ahead and do it anyway. I mean, it's really time that people sit up and take notice and say that things got to be done differently. The message I have is don't give up. You know, we're Americans. We can do this. We're free people. This government doesn't belong to the bureaucrats. It belongs to us, to the people. Don't give up on this.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. If you'd like to call in, there's still some time. You can call in at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can Skype in at Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request, and we will, with your name and where you're from and what you want to talk about, and we will pick that up and bring you on the air. So that last clip, one of the things that he had mentioned is essentially the executive branch, wanting to do everything, and this is something I guess you've heard probably since the beginning of Obama's, not the beginning, but throughout Obama's presidency, about the executive branch just doing things on their own and doing things through executive order. And I got a pen and I got a phone, and just saying that he's going to do all these things. And I know on the other side, you have some of the Republicans saying what they're saying. Now, some of them, I think it's just a little acting there. Some of them, I think they are serious in that they don't like some of the things he's doing. But yeah, I mean, he pretty much just does, I don't know, he does whatever he wants, but for the most part, it's okay, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that or whatever. Like I said, I mean, the laws that actually get passed, most of them are meaningless kind of laws there. The ones that are disagreed upon, more don't get passed, I guess, are ones that, if I look at it from a standpoint of freedom, it doesn't really mean anything. And there have been a lot of executive orders from the standpoint of them being different than old ones. That's where I would hear people say, well, he has less than this president, than Bush, or than Reagan, or whatever. But it was, I think, the type of executive orders that he was pushing through that didn't adhere to the execution of an actual law. But that's kind of a whole nother issue there. So you look at the supposed checks and balances on these groups. What about the check and balance on the most dangerous group probably in the world, the military? Now, the military could, and this is what I talked a little about last night, is that the U.S. military, with all the money spent on them and all the weapons they have and all the shit that we don't even know about, I'm sure there's money that's been spent on the military on things that we have no idea what they are. So you have the military out there with the power that they have. And what would stop the military, if they wanted to, from just taking over the whole country? Because where's the check and balance on that? Somebody tell me. Because that's where you can actually physically do something and nobody can stop you. So they could take over the U.S. government. There could be a military coup. Obviously, the people that in America can't fight against the military, I think they'd have a hard time fighting against the police with all the weapons that they've been given, where you have a militarized police, which is essentially the army of, if you want to, I guess, use American language, or the support for American language, the homeland, basically the homeland army, are the fucking police. And that's why they wanted to federalize them. They've already militarized them. So then they really have an official type army there. But when you look at something like that, that's where the checks and balances and the whole thing with the military, where there's no check and balance on the military, the main point that I have is that there's no check by the people. It's all government. Because it's funny to hear people say it's the people's government and the people's country, and they represent the people. And I wish I had something to play that talks about that, where I remember somebody posting something on my website talking about, when I was talking about the police, well, aren't they our police? Don't they work for us? You know, that type of shit that, oh, the government works for us and the police work for us. And technically, that's how it's supposed to be. But no, they don't. None of them work for us. They all work for themselves or work for the government or whatever you want to call it. But the government is its own separate entity. There's no ownership by the people or accountability to people at all. And how can you have a check and balance if the people are the ones that supposedly the government reports to and the government is responsible to? Then how can you have any checks and balances if they don't involve your average person? And the answer is you can't. You can't have a check and balance of people that have been career politicians that are in different areas in the government. So somebody moves from, hey, you have people that move from the legislative branch to the executive branch. So what does that mean? They used to be a check and balance over here. Now they are over here. There isn't a real check and balance for the people. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, why the government's so fucked up. Now, can there ever even really be a check and balance for the people? Not really, but to an extent. And what I had mentioned yesterday was the fact that people should be able to have whatever the police have, weapon-wise. And at least that's a start. As far as the military, that's a whole nother area, but I don't think anybody could afford what the military has anyway, most of the stuff, or nothing that would really cause, you know, I guess these billionaires could get it, but I think they could get it anyway if they wanted to and buy it on the black market, buy it from other countries if they have that much money and that's what they want to use it for. But I think that people should be able to possess, without a fucking permit, without any of this shit, whatever the police have. And now they have those MRAPs and all that shit and automatic weapons, then people should be able to possess the same thing. And there's your check and balance. Because what is the point of supposed checks and balances and separation of powers? It's so the government doesn't take over, I guess. I mean, that's what I would think the purpose of these things would be, so that the government doesn't just totally take over. Because otherwise, if you had in the executive branch, if they ran everything, then you have a dictator. And almost, I mean, that's almost what it is anyway. But I think you have help from a lot of people in the legislative branch kind of support him doing what he's doing. And what's going to happen too, see, they're setting a precedent here. They're setting okay, well, if Congress doesn't do what you want them to do, then you just do it yourself. And because it doesn't matter who's the president, that it's all rigged anyway, and that it's all just to push this agenda because most of the politicians are controlled anyway, that it's kind of introducing that. So you could say during Obama's stay in the White House, one of the things that came out of it is he started that process of more and more executive orders that are based on laws that are essentially making your own law as opposed to part of the execution of a law, which was what it was supposed to be. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been executive orders in the past that shouldn't have been how they were or that crossed the line. But whether there was or whether there wasn't, they made it public. They talked a lot about it, and they put the idea in people's heads. So everybody thinks about that now like, oh, well, executive order. And that's something that you have in people's heads now, that they may even like the idea of executive order. See, the whole thing of like Bush and to Obama passing the baton, and now Obama's going to pass the baton to the next person, and they're just going to move forward with an agenda that's already laid out, that's already put together. They know where they want to be in the next 10 to 20 years, the global elite or whoever you want to call them. Like I said, I don't know that there is some actual group like the Bilderberg group or something like that that is running things behind the scenes or whatever. I think it's a combination of you have lobbyists with billionaires behind them, corporations. So you have corporations, you have billionaires, you may have some people that are part of these groups. I think it's a mixture. And then you may have people that we don't even know who they are, never heard of them, but they're able to influence the government and get laws and bills and things like that passed. But I think this whole executive order, and because it is a long-term thing, so this whole idea of going to a total government takeover, but it being a generational thing, it being long-term, extra long-term, that it's going to take a long time to get to that point, that they've been doing this for years and years. And as I've said, since the government started in the first place, or when the government was overthrown from the Articles of Confederation. So from then till now, it's been obviously over, I don't know how many generations, 7 or 8 or something like that, maybe more, 10. But that's the whole point, is that enable or to have the ability to do it the way they want to do it. It is something that is a generational thing. As I mentioned Nazi Germany before, and how, yeah, they got that done quick, but then they fell pretty quick too. Because you have to build, if you want to maintain it, they have to build it long term. And that's what I think they're doing, is they're building this for a long term thing. that is going to last. Hopefully not, but in their minds is going to last. So you even have the thing about the executive order. And I really didn't even think of this till now. And I knew that he's been, he's accused all the time of, well, I got my pen and I got this and I'll just, write my own executive order. And essentially, that idea has, I think, been put into people's heads. And when the next person's elected and they start talking about that, it's no big deal anymore because people are used to it. They're used to the president talking about issuing executive orders and issuing executive orders as laws, as opposed to what I said earlier, more of a administrative thing. So it may be something that kind of migrates into more power in the executive branch and more executive orders, but law-oriented executive orders coming out of there. And if you don't like, if Congress doesn't go along with the plan, hey, you were elected president, so you get to pass what you want. There was that went on too. You had people saying that, well, we voted for him. He's the one that people wanted, so he should be able to implement his agenda. And it's like, it's not supposed to work that way, but it sort of is. And that's where this whole, separation of powers, and definitely the whole court, you might as well totally take them out of the picture when it comes to separation of powers, because they just go with whatever party they're a part of, and that's all there is to it. So they don't get involved really in anything that has to do with separating of powers. I mean, they can sit there and find something constitutional or unconstitutional, but I don't think that really affects anything in the big scheme of things, because everybody knows where they're gonna go, and it's gonna be based off of what political agenda they have or political party they are a part of. So you have that, and it's really, even thinking about that, it's not something I had thought of, but the more I think about it, it just makes perfect sense talking about these executive orders and starting to push them and how that affects things. Because ultimately, as I said, the ultimate goal is to get to a society where the government controls everything and everything and everyone and every aspect of your life. And they're getting pretty close to that, but still there's a lot of people that either don't seem to care or know or what. So, well, that's all we have for tonight. Again, we won't be here tomorrow night as it's New Year's Eve, but we'll be back on Tuesday, and I believe Shire Dude will be joining us on Tuesday. Let me play the ShireDude.com. So check him out at ShireDude.com, and of course check us out at NonPartisanLibertyForall.com, as well as Spreaker.com. You can just search for Nonpartisan Liberty for All, and go to YouTube and rate some of the videos in there. I mean, there's not a video per se, but you can listen to the show and there's like the picture, but we're trying to build up the YouTube channel, so Please like us on YouTube and listen to some of the shows on there. So thanks, everybody.
And at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be.